All right, so no doubt about it, I should say, the spring severe season, it is in full swing. And while that's been more than enough to manage, a reminder that we are now less than 50 days out from the Atlantic hurricane season. So it's no coincidence that yesterday the National Hurricane Conference kicked off in New Orleans, a strategic spot, Louisiana, situated along the Gulf. It is particularly susceptible to hurricanes. What you're looking at are just some of the impacts that have been felt by some of the storms that have taken aim at this state, the Bayou State, Katrina, Laura, Ida, just to name a few.
Yeah, it's no doubt a state that is used to this. Hurricanes dating back to the 1800s have made landfall in Louisiana. In fact, according to NOAA's database, more than 4 dozen have made landfall in the state. This year, forecasters, first responders, they're meeting in New Orleans. And joining them is our very own Fox Weather hurricane specialist, Bryan Norcross, joining us this morning from New Orleans. Bryan, good afternoon. Good morning to you. You're in town for the National Hurricane Conference, but there is a reason why New Orleans was chosen to play host for the conference.
Yeah, 20 years since Katrina, of course. It's on everybody's mind here. Yeah. But as life goes on in New Orleans, too, the French Quarter Fest was this weekend. The Strawberry Fest was this weekend. So, I mean, New Orleans is back and functioning and so forth. But when you come here to the lower 9th Ward, so this is where it first started that we knew about. It turns out there was flooding in the city before about 7:45 that morning, August 29th in 2005. But it was this flood wall, or the flood wall, that was here before this new massive system that's been built since, that failed in 2 places. A flood wall and a levee failed, and the water from the industrial canal over there, this is one of the many canals that crisscross this city. This is for to improve shipping into what was going to be the port of New Orleans to the north. That rose up against this flood wall, and they just weren't built like they are now. The water undermined the wall, and the wall tipped over. So if you can imagine, you had water up near the top of the wall from that canal. This was all filled with water, and then the pressure undermining and scouring out underneath of the wall tipped it over, and then this wall of water literally flooded into the neighborhood. So let me show you. This is the Claiborne Avenue Bridge that comes over into the lower 9th Ward. And then look over in the neighborhood over here, and you can see even to this day, there are empty lots and places where homes have never been rebuilt because the water just scoured this neighborhood. And of course, we all remember the incredible pictures that we saw of people on their roofs because the water was up to roof level here, and they used hatchets and whatnot to get out on the roof if they could. And unfortunately, some people couldn't do that, and they died even in the crawl spaces above the house trying to get away from the rising water. So this is where we first heard about it. It turns out that a few hours before, to the north and east here in what's called New Orleans East, again, divided by these canals, failures there actually started all this, but we weren't aware of it. But I remember broadcasting that morning, Stephen and Marissa, and the first alert that I got was just before 7:45 a.m. Central Time, 8:45 Eastern Time, that the flood walls had failed in the lower 9th Ward, flash flood warning in effect. And once that started, we just didn't know what was going to happen. As it turned out, of course, that same mechanism that caused the walls to fail here failed on other parts of the city. This was only responsible for 10, 15, maybe 20% of the flooding in the central part of New Orleans, the central business district of New Orleans, and the biggest part of the city. Most of that flooding came from failures up on Lake Pontchartrain and the canals that were put in there to drain the city from freshwater flooding, from rainfall. But they didn't protect the ends of those canals, and so storm surge came in, knocked over those flood walls and so forth, and that's what flooded most of New Orleans. So the city is divided by all these different canals and now all these flood walls and levee systems that are protecting the city. And these are built, you can see the concrete here, these are built so they can't get scoured underneath. There's concrete here, and if you look at those flood walls over there, look outside, and you see there's a concrete pad that goes down to keep that from happening again. So if we have a hurricane that makes this water rise here up to and over top these flood walls, and it's very possible a big Category 2 hurricane could do that on just the wrong track, but these flood walls should stand so that the water comes up, it comes in, the pumps go into action, and hopefully the flooding is not too bad inside the city, and then the water goes down and the flooding stops. In Katrina, flood walls fell over, so the water went down and the flooding continued, and that was the catastrophe that we all know so well, guys.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you're showing what the lower Ninth Ward or near it with the industrial canal, but as you know, the 17th Street Canal, which there was an engineering flaw with that one, and you had other breaches that you had mentioned.
Yeah, all of these had the engineering flaws. Yes,
Yeah,
all of them. There were two big engineering flaws. One was the T-walls. So they built a kind of a foundation and a wall like this, but the problem was that it wasn't deep enough so the water could scour under it. So that was the first engineering flaw. The second was when they piled up the dirt to make levees. You can see we're standing here on a pile of dirt. Well, they used sand and a combination of shells and very light dirt that they had dug out of the canals, and that wasn't up to the force of the water. It was just badly engineered. So that combination of engineering flaws throughout the system had multiple failures that caused the disaster. This was a civil engineering disaster in New Orleans. In Mississippi, of course, it was a Category 3 hurricane disaster with 28 feet of storm surge directly into southern Mississippi.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of our reality, right? So often our engineering and man-made items are the flaws, the vulnerabilities aren't exposed until you experience the worst of the worst. And Katrina was one that exposed it. Now, the hope is that we've learned and we've strengthened and we've moved on. And that's the thing, right? Kind of opening the scope here, Bryan, and talking about the fact that Louisiana, New Orleans were in the northern part of the Gulf Coast. And as we've seen time and time again, these systems get into the Gulf and there's nowhere to exit except by entering into land. You look back into 2021, we had Ida, and then 2020 was active across the board, but particularly for Louisiana, we had Zeta, Delta, and Laura in 2020. So to choose Louisiana for this conference, it's not lost that this has been the site for some intense hurricanes and just tropical systems.
Yeah, there were really two big topics at the conference so far. One, of course, is Katrina. We heard from emergency manager from Hancock County in Mississippi yesterday about what they went through. I mean, the horrific events that occurred there when you get 28 feet of storm surge that took out their emergency operations center and so forth. We also heard from Craig Fugate, who was the emergency manager in Florida, and what they did to immediately go in with search and rescue to try and save people after Katrina. And then there's another overlay for this conference, as you can imagine, and that's the discussed changes in FEMA. The acting director or administrator of FEMA spoke yesterday and kind of made it clear that there are going to be changes in FEMA. And this is a conference of state and local emergency managers, and nobody knows what that means because everybody knows that the state and local people can't handle these massive disasters. We need the federal government to do it, but how that relationship is going to work in the future, of course, is unknown. So that discussion is everywhere in this conference, along, of course, with talking about the lessons of Katrina.
And I guess it might go without saying, but the levee system, I mean, the improvements that you had highlighted with the hurricanes that Louisiana, New Orleans has weathered, the levees have stood strong since.
Yeah, and there's every expectation they will. I mean, you and I and all American taxpayers contributed to the almost $15 billion that was spent to put these flood walls and levee system around the city with all the very complicated floodgates and so forth. I mean, this is a massive water-oriented part of the country. You know, after Katrina, there was talk that, well, should we spend a lot of money to put a city back in that very vulnerable place? But, you know, the United States depends on New Orleans because this is where the Mississippi comes down into where commerce from the entire middle part of North America comes down to the Gulf, the petrochemical industries and so forth rely on New Orleans being a vibrant city. And of course, New Orleans is one of the most vibrant cities anywhere in the world in culture, in food, and just the richness of this city that is unique in the United States and really unique in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure, Brian, the discussion as we look ahead to the season, CSU putting out their first forecast for the season, a little bit above average is what they're forecasting now for the Atlantic. We'll see them tweak that and reissue an updated forecast in the start of June. But I'm sure that's a part of it too, right? I'm sure a lot of questions you're yielding of, all right, Brian, what should we be planning for,
We should be planning for a hurricane. Everybody in the hurricane zone and well inland, as we have learned last year and we learn over and over again. If you're within striking distance of a tropical system, you need to know what you're going to do if it happens to come this way. Even if it's only one, it doesn't make any difference. It's a horrible year if it comes your way.
And we appreciate, Brian, the fact that you're pulling double duties here because you're participating in the National Hurricane Conference, but then also giving us that perspective of the levee system and just how intricate, complex it is to sustain New Orleans, Louisiana. Brian, good to see you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.